waiting for Senator Rand Paul, the junior senator from Kentucky. Rand is also the author of two books, The Tea Party Goes to Washington, and the more recent Government Bullies, How Everyday Americans Are Being Harassed, Abused, and Imprisoned by the Feds. He also recently got a lot of headlines for his filibuster in the U.S. Senate, where he spoke, I think, for about 13 hours, although he did have a little bit of help, but mainly it was Rand speaking. And his filibuster, the goal of the filibuster was to call attention to the fact that the U.S. government had not basically stated unequivocally that the drones, the drone program could not be used against American non-combatants on U.S. soil. It's amazing that something like this has to be even questions that the president or somebody who was nominated to a department, whether it's defense or CIA or any government agency dealing with national defense, that they wouldn't be able to say unequivocally that under no circumstances would the U.S. government target an American citizen for assassination. You know, there's a big difference between an American who is, armed in combat. I mean, if an American citizen joins a foreign army, that's a lot different. I understand we got Senator Rand Paul on the line. Rand, I guess now you are the big bird, right, of the Wacko Bird Caucus. How does that feel?
Well, I think you take into consideration the source, and I don't know. I think that means you're having an effect. If the old guard is reacting that way and making it personal, I think it means that you're having an effect. And really, on the substance, I think it means you're winning.
Yeah, and I think that you got to pick your battles, and I think John McCain or anybody really ought to be a little bit more reflective on this, because how could you be against the idea that the government can't assassinate American citizens who represent no immediate threat? I mean, it's one thing if you're talking about somebody who's joined a foreign army and you're on a battlefield, but how can anybody oppose the concept that you were trying to focus on and trying to do something to put some kind of cage around government power?
Well, the reason they do is they have this theory that the war has no geographic limits, which means that they believe the war is also here at home. But as a consequence, they think that the laws of war apply. And to them, the laws of war basically are no due process. Now, you can understand that in the battlefield. You don't get an attorney. If you're shooting at American soldiers, you're going to be shot. But if they apply those same rules and say that the law of war applies to America, we're also killing people with drones who are not involved in combat. And my whole point is that you can't use those type of standards in America. That's unacceptable, and that the Constitution definitely applies to all Americans, and we should get our day in court if we're accused of a crime.
And, of course, what they don't understand is the bigger picture about the whole camel's nose under the tent. You can't make these little exceptions, because then the government will creep. They'll get more and more power. And don't they see the potential to abuse this? If you give the government the power to do this with terrorists, then who's a terrorist and who determines it? Is my father a terrorist because he's a tax protester? What about people that are advocating the use of gold? And, can they be killed?
Well, this is precisely the problem. The Wall Street Journal editorialized against me, and they said, well, yeah, of course people who are enemy combatants don't get trials. The whole problem is who is an enemy combatant, and how do you define that? Who gets to deem someone an enemy combatant? And it's easy. If you have arms and you're firing at people, you are an enemy combatant. But what if you're emailing people and you email comments that says, I think it's unfair what this country did to that country, or you send an email to your cousin who lives in Lebanon and you sympathize with people who we say are terrorists. The thing is that enough now to just either have a targeted drone attack on you or to indefinitely detain you? Because this debate really is a continuation of the debate we had a year and a half ago on indefinite detention. When Senator McCain stood up, I asked him, I said, does this mean an American citizen could be sent to Guantanamo Bay without any kind of jury trial? And he said, yes, if we deem them to be an enemy combatant, to be a danger to the country. The whole problem is in the deeming process. Who gets to be the deemer?
Yeah, and of course, if the government can simply send you to jail by deeming you a terrorist, then why would they ever try anybody? They would simply deem you a terrorist and off you would go.
And that's the problem, is that we've been, we're all upset about people who attacked us. Nobody likes that. Everybody thinks we should have, or most of everybody thinks we should have responded to people who attack us, not let people attack us. But the problem is then defining terrorism. Once you say that anybody associated with, and then we see some of the government documents that have come forward. The Bureau of Justice had a document that talked about who might be a terrorist, and some of the characteristics were likes to pay in cash, missing fingers, has more than 7 days of food at home, has weatherized ammunition, and you start to wonder, well, my goodness, that could include a lot of people who aren't really terrorists. Then you combine that with the Missouri Fusion Center that talked about Constitution Party and Libertarian Party people being potential terrorists, and that's a really worrisome fact that then we talk about, well, they could be detained without trial.
Yeah, but, I think this is an issue that I think is a winner for the liberty, wing of the Republican Party. And I'm interested to see the kind of reception you get, at CPAC this week. Because I remember, when I've been there in the past, there's been, when your dad was there, you'd get, there was a lot of Ron Paul supporters and you'd hear the applause, but you'd almost hear an equal amount of boos. And the boos were generally coming from the old guard, the neocons. And I'm wondering if this time when you speak, if the applause are going to more than drown out some of those boos.
I think ultimately what we're finding is that there is a certain unifying aspect to this, and that, when I talk to the young soldiers in my state who have gone over and volunteered to fight for us, they believe they're fighting for the Bill of Rights and for the Constitution, and so it's sad for them to sacrifice their lives and limbs and come home and then find out that we gave up on the Bill of Rights while they were gone. And our young men have a lot of time to think about this when they're waiting around in between battles and worried about IEDs and all of that. They have to believe that they're fighting for something big that we represent. And to come home and find out that the Bill of Rights no longer applies in America and that we're under some sort of law of war, I think it has to be disappointing to the people fighting for our country. And
it's, the Founding Fathers warned us, over and over about not sacrificing your liberty for security. And that if you value your security more than your liberty, the irony is you'll end up losing both. And this is exactly the point of your filibuster and what you're protesting. And by the way, while you were filibustering, I was on a cruise in the Caribbean, so I wasn't able to actually hear what you were saying. But, you talked for 13 hours. What did you talk about?
So while I was up there, with my feet hurting from standing for 13 hours, you had your feet up in a Chase lounge. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah, I was on a cruise. I wish I could have been there with you, but unfortunately, the people of Connecticut didn't elect me, so you had to do the work for me.
No, but it did bring a lot of people together. About 20 senators came out in support of it, and 15 or 20 congressmen actually came over spontaneously. So I think that, plus the outpouring of support on the Internet, shows that people are concerned about the bigger principles, the constitutional principles, and what makes America great. And I think that we're not so afraid anymore that people are thinking, well, gosh, because terrorists are attacking us, we need to just arrest anybody who we think might be a terrorist and there's no trial. I think people are concerned about that. They're also concerned about the fact that these drones can and are killing people who aren't actively engaged in combat. And then we get these crazy definitions from the president who says, well, they need to be an imminent threat, but that doesn't mean they are an immediate threat. And so when you hear stuff like that, you're like, boy, that's a pretty murky definition of imminent. I wonder who all that could include. And people become concerned that, well, gosh, maybe a politician doing flashcards and a PowerPoint presentation shouldn't get to decide who's guilty and decide who gets targeted in the United States in particular.
Now, what about bringing this the filibuster strategy to something that I think could even be more significant if you could pull it off, and that would be to the increase in the debt ceiling. We had the sequester. The country didn't fall apart because theoretically the government isn't spending as much as it wanted to. But what about actually forcing real cuts by not allowing the debt ceiling to be raised?
I think ultimately, if you don't want to allow the government to raise the debt ceiling, you have to have something that directs the president that he can't do the silly things he's doing now. like closing the White House to tours, because what he would do under that circumstance is do all the petty mischief that he's doing now, but multiplied 1,000-fold. So really, do you want?
I think, Rand, I think that stuff is impeachable. I mean, can a president, if somebody who's, a department head tells the president, hey, we can cut out some expenditures and just that are wasting money and the public won't notice it, and the president says, no, don't do that. Just cut the stuff that the public cares about and preserve all the waste that we don't need. I mean, to deliberately undermine government services like that as the commander-in-chief, you think he would have a fiduciary responsibility to try to make sure the cuts were done in a good way, but to deliberately do it to score political points, to me that's impeachable.
Yeah, I can probably list 100 different wasteful programs, studying monkeys on meth, studying robotic squirrels, albino squirrel parks, turtle tunnels, you name it. We can go through a long list. And yet those things are still existing. There's been no uniform request that just says, hey, we're not going to spend any on these wasteful studies anymore. And instead, we're going to cut off the visible things. So he does have the power to do it, and that's what he's doing. I mean, they've closed the entrances, most of the entrances to the office buildings up here. So we have guarded entrances, and almost all of them are closed now. So there's long lines of staff members trying to get into work outside on the pavement today. There's probably 100, maybe 150 staff members on the sidewalk waiting in an hour-long line because he's closed off the entrances. I asked one of the Capitol Hill police, I said, well, did he send the people home that normally work at these entrances? He said, no, they've been reassigned. So somewhere I imagine this big room, I guess, with, I don't know, all these Capitol Hill policemen, I don't know what they're doing, but they're apparently not been furloughed and aren't at home. And they are.
Well, I guess you never know. The president might have to go golfing with Tiger Woods again, and he needs all those Secret Service guys, for his motorcade. But, even the woman, apparently the woman that runs the White House tours, she gets paid over $100,000 a year. You'd think since they canceled the tours, they would at least have fired her. But no, she's still on the job. I guess I don't know what she's doing since there are no more tours. But, they've been doing White House tours for how many years? I mean, since the beginning. I mean, they obviously can do White House tours with a little bit of money.
You realize they're self-guided tours. There's not even tour guides. So we've canceled the self-guided tours, but we're keeping the person in charge of them who makes $100,000 a year. She's probably at her desk every day. She's no longer in charge, doing any work directing the self-guided tours. So no, it's all pomp and circumstance. It's trying to get his way in a petty, but I gave him a whole series of suggestions where he could do the sequester even without any layoffs. You save $6.5 billion a year just by not rehiring the people who retire. You save $32 billion a year if you'd make government salaries commensurate with private salaries. You can save another $2 or $3 billion by cutting back on travel of employees. You can save $19 billion by having competitive contracts for every government contract, and then we threw in another $20 billion by cutting 50% of foreign aid. So you can easily come to the $85 billion, and really nobody loses their job.
Yeah. Well, Rand, I think I really got to congratulate you. I think that you accomplished a lot with the filibuster. I think you shined a spotlight on a place where it needed to be shined. But I think in the process, I think you really elevated your stature in the Republican Party. And I think you're positioned well to gain on that. Hopefully you will decide to run for president in 2016.
Well, our hope is just to elevate the principles, and if we can get the talk to the Bill of Rights around here, the limitations on presidential power, the limitations on legislative power from the Constitution. If we
Rand, I hate to cut you off, but we got a hard break. Hey, everybody else, hour 2 coming up. We'll be right back.
We've been judging people by color. Maybe we should all